Every civilization, every golden age, every collapse, it has all happened before and it will all happen again. This is the secret hidden in the Yuga cycle, an ancient system that describes the rise and fall of human consciousness over thousands of years. The world you live in now, it is not the peak of civilization. It is the final phase, the last age before everything resets. We are in Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. And what comes next? Depends on whether enough people wake up before the cycle ends. The Yugas are 4 great ages that repeat in a cycle, just like the changing of the seasons. 1. Satya Yuga, the age of truth and enlightenment, the golden age. 2. Treta Yuga, the age of decreasing purity, the silver age. 3. Dwapara Yuga, the age of materialism and loss of wisdom, the bronze age. 4. Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and corruption, the iron age. Right now, we are at the bottom. We are in Kali Yuga, the lowest point of human consciousness, the age of lies, corruption, war, and deception. The time when the rulers of the world thrive on ignorance, and the people are kept blind to the truth. The Kali Yuga is the darkest time in the cycle, the age when lies replace truth, the strong dominate the weak. Greed and materialism rule, knowledge is hidden or erased. Sound familiar? History is rewritten, spiritual wisdom is suppressed. The masses are kept distracted with entertainment, division, and false realities. This is why empires rise and fall overnight, technology advances but morality collapses, people are more connected than ever but completely lost. This is the age where the true rulers of the world work in the shadows, keeping humanity trapped in a low state of consciousness, because they know what happens when the cycle shifts. Every yuga has an endpoint, and according to the ancient texts, Kali Yuga does not last forever. Eventually, the corruption becomes too great, the illusion becomes too obvious, and the system collapses under its own weight. What comes next? Dwapara Yuga. Dwapara Yuga is the transition phase, the time when the hidden knowledge starts to return. People begin to break free from the illusion. The rulers of the old age lose their grip. This is the moment when truth cannot be hidden anymore. The real history of the world starts to emerge. The people who were kept asleep begin to see the system for what it is. The collapse of false power structures begins. This is why the elite are panicking right now. They know Kali Yuga is ending, and when the cycle shifts, they lose control. The final question, will you break the cycle? The Yuga cycle repeats, but it is not just automatic. The question is, will we wake up fast enough to move into a higher state? Or will the world collapse completely before the shift happens? Because just like before, there are forces trying to keep us trapped in darkness, trying to extend Kali Yuga for as long as possible. But the cycle cannot be stopped. It always turns. The only question is, will you be ready when it does?
So the cyclical time paradigm was universal. You found it in China, you found it in India, of course, but it was there in Greece and Rome, and it was there with the Danu, and it was there with many other peoples. I think all, in fact. So the time cycle is a part of the heritage of humanity that only was jettisoned by the Roman Empire and the Catholic, let's say, bastardization of Christianity, the changing of the real teachings of Rav Yeshua, that took time as being linear. There was still an end time, so it was a limited time. And in the same way in the Jewish tradition, a linear time, but a time which was known as a Heilsgeschichte in the German version of that understanding, as expressed by Martin Buber and other Hasidim, that although time entropically leads to a decline, not a progress, but at the end there is the time of the Messiah, and there will be a world to come. So implicitly, the linearity is still cyclical. And you find that in the mystical Christian mystics as well, the more esoteric teachers who are teaching theosis, the divinization of man, is the return to that. And you find it in the Quran as well, because of Adam being considered the first and highest prophet who had all the names, as we heard recently. So that knowledge returns, and therefore the paradise, which is the environment of the Adamic being, becomes remanifest. And they did have the understanding that the first Yuga, which is called variously the Golden Age or Sat Yuga, Krita Yuga, Satya Yuga, various different names, but it is also referred to as the solar dynasty, as the second age is the lunar dynasty. But it wasn't that these people worshipped the sun. No, that was a much later fallen state of the remembrance of that. It meant that they were in a state of total consciousness, that the consciousness of every inhabitant of the golden age was literally the light of the sun of suns, the source of the light that creates the universe, and that manifests as the sun and the stars and all of the heavenly bodies and the celestial light that is a reflection of the supreme supernal light. So the understanding of the solar dynasty is the complete consciousness that is independent. It does not require a reflection from another, as the moon requires the light of the sun. So once you get into the lunar dynasty, you already have a shift from non-duality to duality. The duality is still a high one because the moon is full or mostly full, but it is still a fallen state. It is a state where now, rather than being in Atman consciousness, they are in soul consciousness. And then in the Copper Age, the soul and the ego are together. That's one reason why it's called Dwapara Yuga. The two towers, the two powers of soul and ego are in relationship, that the ego eventually becomes dominant and represses the soul, and that begins Kali Yuga. So we have a cycle of time, but it is clear that in the Sat Yuga, time stops. There is no sense of time because every being lives in the present and lives egolessly. And lives in a state in which the world and the self are not different, and the world is perceived directly as light, as the emanation of consciousness and not different from consciousness. So there is a non-duality and a sense that all that is not even a dream, but a perfect reflection in space of the information, the beauty, the power of the self, and that it is the self, that the world is internal to the self, not other than the self. So the consciousness then gradually shifts, and by the time we get to Kali Yuga, of course, the ego is embedded in duality. It has a split mind. It considers the world to be separate and objective and different from consciousness and outside of consciousness, even though it's very clear that nothing is outside consciousness. You couldn't know anything that was outside your consciousness. But there's a belief, and it's a religious belief that's called science, but it's a religion, that we are actually in a world that exists independently of us. Because consciousness is identified with bodies, and bodies are temporary phenomena that come and go in the world. They are part of the impermanence of the flux of time, but the consciousness remains present, even though it becomes unaware of its presence because it becomes lost in thought. And as soon as your consciousness becomes lost in thought, and you believe that that thought is what you are, I think, therefore I am, as soon as you become lost in that, you live in the past and the present, because thought is all about that. Wishing that the past was still here, or that it didn't happen, but having some relationship, nostalgic or horrified by the past, and some fantasy about the future that is either positive, hopeful, or negative and fearful. But the ego is always ping-ponging between these and is never present. And so it feels a lack of being, because being, the real, is only presence. And the ego never knows presence, because in the present it dissolves, it dissipates. And so the mind continually chatters because it is terrified of its own dissolution, its disappearance into a presence that is so awesome and so full of energies that the ego cannot tolerate it. It cannot tolerate the bliss that would show up if you remained present for an extended period. The ego would begin to dissolve, and all that would remain is presence. This is the whole point of meditation, but very few people meditate in such a way that the presence remains consistent and unbroken long enough to dissolve the sanskaras, the latent tendencies of the ego mind, so that the ego pops back after the meditative formality and is never dislodged from its fictional condition as a character. But the presence that is beyond the fictional entity that one comes to believe one is, because the belief that the mind has reality and represents one takes over as the implicit religion of the ego itself, that cannot be undone or seen through by the ego, because it is based upon that, and it dreads its knowing its own lack of reality, of essence. So it is only in moments of trauma, when one becomes speechless, that one knows presence, or moments of divine love, or being hit by a lightning bolt of Shakti, or one is filled with that supreme presence to the point where the ego dissolves completely, that one has the sense of what the real truly is. So time itself changes its qualities as it goes on, and consciousness becomes more dense, and the world, rather than being a dream, becomes something that is all too solid and all too resistant and all too filled with danger, so that it has to be experienced by beings who remain vigilant and on guard, and using their minds to calculate their way of dealing with reality and trying to get whatever benefits can be extracted from the flow of temporal change. And the consciousness does not have the luxury of abiding in presence, because of its paranoid tendency to need to compare the current situation with the past and try to create an optimal future. So time from the perspective of the classical period is seen as a circle that is entirely present all at once. There is a recognition that when you enter a state of total presence, you enter a higher dimension in which the apparent flow of time is entirely here. There is no past and no future, even though there is history and there is the apparent shift. But actually, it's an illusion because consciousness is present throughout it all, and that presence is always here and now. And so all of time is present in every moment, in the same way that the entire ocean is contained in every drop. You are a microcosm of the macrocosm, but all of your past and future lives and all of your experiences are present in every moment if you are silent and still enough to perceive all of that information. It's there, but it's too subtle for the ego mind, which is chattering, to pay attention to. And this is why information can be drawn from the so-called Akashic records. It's simply the information of the entire kalpa that is entirely present in every moment if you pay attention. And you know how to decode that vibrational frequency in which it is contained. So presence is the key to liberation, because presence is non-duality. And so this is why meditation is the path, the key to attaining the liberation that is always here, because in fact there is no one needing to be liberated, since the ego is a fictional entity. And so because you are not the ego, you only believe you are actually that total presence. As soon as that belief is dropped, the goal of liberation is recognized as being your natural state. And it could not be anything else. So this is the understanding that we must be able to fully grok in order to be liberated from not simply the illusion of impermanence, but the fear and desire that the ego is based on as its effort to overcome its lack of being, and which it can never do. So presence is the only medicine to overcome that endless journey through the illusion of time that can never reach fulfillment until time itself comes to an end.